Yo, welcome to Six Layers, the comic interview show, period. I'm Mike the Six Layer, chilling with Mark the Honorable Villain. What up, fam?
What's up, Mike? I grew up on our next guest's work. Both Old Man Logan and Civil War were two of the first books my brother bought for me. Let him know who we got, man.
Joining us today, we have top tier color artist Morry Hollowell joining us. But before we chop it up with Morry, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right. Our next guest is the color artist for hit books like Civil War, Old Man Logan, and Non-Stop Spider-Man. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you Morry Hollowell. How you doing, Morry?
Good. Nice to be here.
Hey, man, it's good to see you again. Long time no see. We're going to just dive right on in. So, Morry, you've been a long-time exclusive Marvel artist. Since then, you've been free agent. From your experience, what's the main differences between being exclusive with the company and being a freelance artist?
Workflow. When you're exclusive, with my experience being exclusive with Marvel, they kept me busy when I was on contract. You know, anytime I had downtime, all I had to do was contact them and they would send me whatever they had to keep me busy. It really luxurious being on a contract, you know, because you really can put that sort of business mind aside and focus on the work. Where when I'm my own agent now, when I have downtime, I'm sort of sitting there twiddling my thumbs, wishing I had work, and I've got to put on some charisma. I have to reach out. I have to talk to people I've met at conventions and stuff, and try to get that extra work I need to get a paycheck to pay the bills.
And what is that landscape like as far as like the big two? Do they even have exclusive color artists anymore?
They're still doing it. I still know some other colorists that are exclusive still. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody gets out purposefully. Maybe if they think, they really want to spread their wings and work in other places. Speaking for myself, I would have kept on being exclusive for Marvel, till my grave.
All right, so I got another question I want to ask you, Morry, and this is as a digital artist in general, right? Do you have any concerns over the popularity of AI within comics? Is that a threat to you?
I have an interesting point of view on this, I feel, because I've seen almost hysterics online from some people over the use of AI. The side of it I agree with is they trained the artificial intelligence on other people's artwork. And I think there's very good reason to question the legality of that. I imagine it's even trained on all my coloring from Civil War and Old Man Logan and stuff like that. Will I ever see any money from them training their AI on that? Will anybody else? I definitely think there's a huge ethical and legal concern there. But the other part of it that I sort of I'm observant of it. I haven't used it yet at all. I haven't generated a single image, but I have been toying with it and seeing its capabilities with just talking to it and stuff. And I do think it's pretty amazing. And there's something there. Just like when the computer first came out, artists were freaking out and saying, don't do digital work. It's bad. Doing your work on paper is the way to do it. And people were doing the same thing. They were in hysterics over it when it first appeared. So I think over time, it'll find its place. I think there will be ethical uses for it. How that manifests, I'm not sure.
Now, what about as it pertains to like a color artist? Do you think they could automate those skills? Can an AI be trained to do that?
Yes. The short answer is yes, 100%. Again, I think it becomes an ethical question on whether you want the artificial intelligence to be doing certain things for you. Like maybe if I had an AI do my flats instead of hiring a flatter from now on, am I being ethical doing that? My flatter has lost his job, but on the other hand, I'm saving income and I'm eliminating one of the slower, more mundane processes. Do I do it? Or if, like you were saying, some of these artists, they don't need their inker anymore because they can just darken their pencils and touch it up and it's done on their end on their own. And doing things digitally, with perspective and backgrounds and reference, there are shortcuts that really save a lot of time. And if you're a true comic book artist, I don't know any comic book artist that could argue with the fact that a lot of making a comic book requires shortcuts. You see a lot of these things where they teach you, to create silhouettes and stuff to speed up the process of making a comic book. And that could apply in this situation where if AI does my flats for me and it not only saves me money, but is quicker and gets me to be able to do more of the work myself, that's good for the comic to get out on a monthly process.
Morry, I want to get onto this blockbuster note that you were on 2 blockbuster projects that became 2 blockbuster movies, Old Man Logan and Civil War. What immediately came to mind when you found out that those projects that you worked on were becoming movies?
Well, it's beautiful. I'm a huge nerd. I've been a geek my whole life. I'm a comic fan, and the fact that we're living in a future where we're getting comic book movie after comic book movie after comic book movie is just, I don't want it to ever stop. And it's been really amazing seeing the project I worked on become movies. And it's not only those 2. Thunderbolts is coming out here in a week.
Yeah.
And it's looking like some of it's based on the Century stuff I did in New Avengers with Brian Bendis.
And Spider-Man 4 is sounding like it's going to become Brand New Day.
New Day, yep.
So Morry, you're talking about you being a lifelong comic book fan. I want to backtrack a little. What was it like growing up as a comic book fan in Alaska? And what's Alaska like in general?
Well, back when I was growing up, there was no internet or anything. And it was pretty widely talked about that most of the communities were probably behaving in years behind what people that were living in the lower 48 is what we would call them, the lower 48 people. They were way ahead of us. I'm sure it's much different now. Everybody's got the internet. Everybody's pretty much caught up with each other. But I think, like I told you last time we had an interview, my dad was a huge hunter. We would go fishing, salmon fishing. We'd go hunt bear, moose, doing all this stuff. All I wanted to do was read comic books, and I would find comics at places like the Hallmark store, or sometimes cabins would have a spinner rack, and it wasn't until I think high school where I found the local comic book store, and then it just blew up for me. That was my hangout, from then on.
That's awesome. Okay, we also know that you're an alum from the Kubert School, right?
Yes.
During your application process, did you apply to any other schools? Did you apply to the School of Visual Arts, or were you both locked in on Kubert School?
Had I known more about the School of Visual Arts, I think I would have applied there as well, but I didn't. I just knew about Kubert School, and I was hell-bent on going there.
All right, so here's a process question, more like process evolution question. Think back to your time at CrossGen. How has your work process changed since your CrossGen days?
My most basic process hasn't changed. What I learned in Kubert School, in the painting classes mostly, the acrylic class where you're working dark to light, that's my fallback. But luckily, I can apply that to most of these new programs. I think that's where things get new. I'm using Procreate a lot more often. I'm using Clip Studio a lot more often, and they each have their, strengths and weaknesses. I've used Photoshop so long, it's probably a crutch for me at this point, because anytime I get flustered or need to really get something done, I just port it right over to Photoshop where I'm comfortable and can, really kick its ass.
You're a veteran in the game. I wanted to get your take on this. Want to give credit where credit is due. Who do you think is the godfather of digital coloring? Let's keep it just strictly Photoshop, because Photoshop is the standard, right? Like, as far as the software.
Well, I wish I had a better answer for you. Again, as memory serves, it first started in the image books with stuff like McFarlane and I always followed the pencilers, so I couldn't even tell you who was coloring.
Hey, you know what's funny about that? Steve Oliff did Spawn #1. So you're just saying in general, you're saying Image Comics. Then you're giving Image Comics which is technically true when you think about it on a large scale and what they brought to the table. When you look at, let's just say Spawn #1, right? You take Spawn #1, that book, first print, and take anything off Marvel racks and open up the page, and it looks way different. It looks way different. Like it's a cut above, like just how Spawn #1 is produced. Would you agree?
Yeah. In fact, I feel the books back then that were competing with the image books were the painted books, because they would have as much detail, or if not, look even better.
Morry, I wanted to come back to CrossGen. I want to talk about your first time working with Steve McNiven, and how did that relationship carry on to Marvel Comics?
It was really good. He was practicing his comic book skills at CrossGen. He wasn't a total newbie, but he was just starting out then. And a lot of us were sort of starting out then. Myself, it was the first time I was using my actual name and not writing McNabb Studios. And so I feel in a way we were all sort of growing together. And what a beautiful melting pot of creativity CrossGen was. It was like the old Marvel bullpen. You just had artists after artist, and we also had, the writers, and, anybody you needed to talk to or wanted to learn from was there. Even on the printing and the process of making the book or lettering the book, you could walk over to those people and see exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it. And so I got to see Steve really grow as a penciler, and I was very jealous. I was always in the back of my mind wanting to pencil, but I'd gotten so good at coloring, I was constantly coloring all the time. So it was neat to sit back and watch him grow and see what books he used for reference and how often he would study hands. Sometimes he would do pages of heads from all different angles and stuff, and seeing how often he would practice that stuff via actually producing a book, or how much he would reference things. And again, he was doing what I was doing. We had all these amazing people around us. Bart Sears, Ron Mars, Brandon Peterson, so many people we could walk over and see, what's their process? How do they achieve what they're achieving? And they'd been in the industry for a long time and producing, big stuff. Like with Bart Sears, he was doing covers to Wizard magazine, and talk about nobody better to talk to about anatomy. Like, that guy knows how to draw muscles. He knows where all of them are and how to make them, comic book large, so it was fantastic. So seeing him go through that and growing and being able to talk to him, I was learning from people like Laura Martin how to improve my colors, and Justin Ponzer, rest in peace, watching him, seeing what his tips and tricks were, and then applying it to Steve's work and talking with Steve and seeing, like, hey, do you like it when I do this? Do you like it when I do that? And because I think I created that relationship, it will put me in a position to be on him when he went to Marvel.
Was CrossGen really like a 9 to 5? Did you guys really have like a clock in time and then a clock out time?
Technically, yes. It was a 9 to 5. To this day, it was the best job I've ever had. We had health insurance, we had dental. It was a consistent paycheck, and again, similar to being on contract, it was an endless supply of work. There was never time for me to sit there and twiddle my thumbs, because they could just give me something else, or they could put me on somebody else's book and help them finish it, or so they can reach their deadline. And then as far as the 9 to 5, a certain group of me, Derek Donovan, and others, we were always there sort of from 5 to midnight. We were there at the late hours, and it would sort of be quieter. You get a lot more chance to focus and get things done, but also bigger chances to sort of goof off and play at the foosball table.
I wanted to ask you a comic book business question. How are colors involved in royalties across publishing lines? Is there a difference in the page rate when you color a cover versus when you color a page?
Yeah. I'll tell you again, this is I can only talk about what I've experienced personally, so it's going to be different with everybody you talk to. Since, again, the bonus of me being plucked from CrossGen was I had a pretty good rate when Marvel picked me up. So they had to sort of put me in a place where I had a similar income. So I had $150 for interiors and $200 for covers. And it's pretty much been exactly that to this day. It's rare I get paid anything more, except for maybe a penciled cover that needs cleaning up. Sometimes they'll throw me some more for something like that. And then as far as royalties, we get, I think it's like 10% of 10%. The smallest royalties out of everybody except for maybe the letterer, and I don't even know if they get a royalty, honestly. But we do, thankfully, I've been lucky that contract I signed when I got onto Marvel gave me royalties. And so to this day, I still get checks from like the Civil War reprints and the old Man Logan reprints. I still get little checks here and there, which have really helped me. I live paycheck to paycheck. So when those royalties show up, man, sometimes it's a lifesaver.
We're on our very last question, Morry. And is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want the fans to know about? Any upcoming projects? Any new appearances? Anything else that you want to say?
I think you hit on one of the things that I would talk to fans about already, and that go enjoy the heck out of these movies. They're great, but then go to the comic book store. These movies, they're built, upon great books. Not to blow myself up or anything.
But, do that.
These books are so amazing. It's like I became a fan at an early age for a reason. Comic books are a portal to another world, and you get to see so many different perspectives and lifestyles and people's dreams through this medium.
Fantastic words, Morry. Thank you so much for joining us. You know you always got a home here on the Six Layer Station, so thank you once again.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the like button. This is Six Layers. I'm Mike, speaking for Mark and Morry Hollowell. We are out. Peace.
Six Layers.